In the heart of the valley, where the village of Ahiara rests, there is a rule that every villager knows by heart. Never leave your clothes on the line after sunset. This isn't just a suggestion or a cautionary tale. It's a law of survival, etched into their daily lives. As the sun sets and shadows grow long, the villagers rush to gather every thread of fabric from their clotheslines. Mothers scold their children for dawdling, elders mutter prayers, and even the most carefree youth obey the rule without question. It's not fear of theft or the weather that drives this urgency. It's something far more chilling. For generations, the people of Ahiara have believed that clothes left outside after dark become a doorway to the unseen world, a silent invitation for the Aguji spirits to weave mischief into the fabric. These spirits, they say, are neither good nor evil. They are watchers of the night, creatures that find joy in tampering with what is left exposed under the moon's silver gaze. But why clothes? Clothes carry a piece of us, the elders explain. Our sweat, our warmth, even the scent of our lives clings to the threads. To the Aguji spirits, these are not just garments, they are a part of who we are. The story begins on an ordinary evening in Ahiara, a village where traditions hold firm and every thread of fabric tells a story. But what happens when someone forgets this sacred rule? When one small mistake invites the unseen into their lives? Let's step into the moonlit mystery of Ahiara and discover the threads that bind the human world to the supernatural. Azuka was not like most young women in the village of Ahiara. While many of her peers embraced the customs and traditions taught by their elders, Azuka saw them as unnecessary burdens. To her, life was about hard work, practical thinking, and moving forward, not following rules that made no sense in her eyes. At 23, she was already known for her sharp wit and relentless work ethic, running a small but growing vegetable farm that supplied much of the village market. Her days were packed from sunrise to sunset. She would haul baskets of yams to the market in the morning, haggle with buyers, and rush back home to tend her fields before the evening breeze set in. Why waste time worrying about spirits when there's real work to be done? She often muttered to herself. Azuka's frustration with village customs ran deep. The elders constantly repeated rules that sounded ridiculous to her modern mind. Don't whistle at night, or you'll call the spirits. Don't sweep after dark, or you'll sweep away your luck. And, of course, the one that irritated her most, never leave your clothes outside after sunset. To Azuka, these were relics of the past, stories meant to scare children into behaving. She had never seen any spirits, and no one could explain exactly why these rules mattered, only that they must be followed. Every time someone reminded her about the clothesline rule, she rolled her eyes. Her mother, Neka, was one of the strongest voices against Azuka's defiance. Azuka, you're too stubborn for your own good, Neka scolded one evening as they sat by the fire, shelling groundnuts. These rules keep us safe. They are not for you to question. But safe from what, Mama? Azuka shot back. The sun sets, the moon rises, and life goes on. Spirits don't come and touch clothes. They're just stories to scare us. Neka shook her head, her voice low but firm. You don't have to believe in the spirits, but respect what has kept this village in harmony for generations. Some things are bigger than your understanding. This conversation was not new to Azuka. Her mother had repeated it countless times, as had her older brother Emeka, who was quick to remind her of the consequences of ignoring tradition. One day, you'll learn, Azuka. I just hope it won't be the hard way, he often said, his tone more pitying than stern. Even outside her home, the pressure to conform was constant. In the marketplace, older women would shake their heads and whisper about Azuka's defiance. That girl thinks she knows everything, they would say. Let her break the rules and see what happens. But Azuka was not one to back down. To her, these warnings were just the echoes of fear passed from one generation to the next. Why should I waste time and energy following rules that don't help me grow my farm or make my life easier? She told her closest friend, Amaka, as they walked home one evening. Amaka, who was far more cautious, looked around nervously before replying. Azuka, some things are not for us to question. What if they're true? What if the spirits really do? Spirits this, spirits that, Azuka interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. I work harder than half the people in this village, and I've never needed any spirits to help me. If they exist, let them come and tell me themselves. Amaka shook her head, but said nothing more. She knew arguing with Azuka was like trying to stop the wind. This constant push and pull, between her desire to forge her own path and the weight of her family's and community's expectations, left Azuka feeling both determined and isolated. Deep down, there was a flicker of doubt, a small voice that wondered if she was being reckless. But Azuka pushed it aside. She was determined to live on her own terms, even if it meant challenging everything she had been taught. After a long and tiring day at the market, Azuka dragged herself home, her feet dusty and aching. The village buzzed with the usual evening chatter, children laughing as they chased each other, mothers shouting reminders to bring water from the stream, and the rhythmic pounding of yams in mortar bowls. But none of it mattered to Azuka. All she wanted was a moment of peace. When she entered her small compound, her eyes landed on her favorite red wrapper, crumpled in a dirty heap near the corner. Earlier that day, she had spilled palm oil on it while helping her neighbor with lunch preparations. It was her best wrapper, the one she always wore for special occasions, and she couldn't bear to see it stained. Sighing heavily, she grabbed a bucket, filled it with water from the clay pot, and began scrubbing the fabric. The cool water soothed her tired hands as she worked, determined to remove every trace of the stubborn stain. By the time she finished, the moon was already rising, casting a soft glow over the compound. I'll just leave it on the line for the night, Azuka muttered to herself, wringing out the wrapper. It'll dry faster in the cool night breeze, and I can pick it up first thing in the morning. Her grandmother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. Never leave clothes on the line at night. The moonlight isn't meant for cloth. Azuka shook her head, dismissing the thought. These old stories are nothing but scare tactics, she said under her breath. With that, she hung the wrapper carefully on the line that stretched between two bamboo poles in the corner of the compound. Satisfied, she went inside, closed her wooden door and lay down on her mat, exhaustion pulling her into a restless sleep. As the moon climbed higher into the sky, a strange stillness settled over Ahiara. The usual sounds of crickets and croaking frogs seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. A faint chill crept through the village. In the compound, the wrapper swayed ever so slightly, though the air was still. Then came the whispers, soft, almost melodic, like a distant song carried on the wind. The Aguji spirits had arrived. They came silently, their presence marked by an eerie shimmer in the air around them, like heat rising from a pot. They moved without footsteps, their forms formless yet commanding, drawn irresistibly to the garment. The wrapper seemed to respond as the spirits approached. It fluttered unnaturally, its fabric twisting as though unseen hands were pulling at it. The spirits circled the clothesline, humming softly, their energy thrumming with curiosity. For the Aguji, clothes were not just fabric. To them, they were relics of the human spirit, imbued with the wearer's scent, sweat, and life force. The spirits, fascinated, began their work. Threads shimmered under the pale moonlight, weaving themselves into intricate patterns that glowed faintly. Colors faded, bright blues and reds dimming to ashen hues. The air grew colder and heavier as the spirits' whispers intensified. Though the family slept, the night seemed to ripple with unease. Inside the hut, Azuka stirred in her sleep. A chill ran through her, and she pulled her blanket tighter, muttering something unintelligible. Across the room, Chitty tossed and turned, his dreams troubled by shadows that seemed to chase him. Adiz, who had fallen asleep late after her conversation, woke suddenly, a strange feeling of unease gripping her chest. Even their mother, a light sleeper, shifted uncomfortably on her mat. But none of them realized what was happening just outside their door. The forgotten wrapper had become a silent bridge between the world of humans and the spirits, and the Aguji were weaving their mischief. The next morning, Azuka woke early to retrieve her wrapper. As she approached the clothesline, something fell off. The air was unnaturally still, and the birds, usually chirping loudly at this hour, were quiet. She reached for her favorite red wrapper, but as soon as her fingers touched it, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The wrapper looked different. The bright red she loved now seemed dull, and faint silver threads ran through the fabric, shimmering faintly in the morning light. Azuka frowned. She hadn't noticed these threads before. "Maybe the moonlight played tricks on my eyes," she muttered, shaking her head. She wrapped the cloth around her waist and went about her chores, brushing away a nagging feeling of unease. As the day went on, strange things began to happen. While carrying a basket of yams to the shed, Azuka felt a prickling sensation on her skin, as if someone was watching her. She turned around quickly, but no one was there. Later, while cooking, she heard her name whispered faintly. It was so soft she almost convinced herself it was the wind. But when it happened again, Azuka, she froze. The voice was unmistakable and unnerving. By midday, the unease had spread to others in the village. A little boy who had brushed past Azuka earlier complained of chills, despite the sweltering heat. His mother noticed and muttered, "It's not normal for a child to feel cold in this kind of weather." When a goat tied near Azuka's compound suddenly broke free and ran into the forest, the whispers among the villagers grew louder. Word of Azuka's strange wrapper and the whispers she heard began to spread. Some villagers gathered by her compound, their faces tense with fear and suspicion. "She left her clothes outside last night," muttered an older woman, crossing her arms. "She should have known better." Another man, bold and accusing, added, "Now the spirits are angry. This is what happens when you ignore the warnings of our elders." Others, however, came to her defense. "It was a mistake," said Ada, a close friend of Azuka. "She didn't mean to offend the spirits. We've all forgotten things at times. Why should she be blamed so harshly?" But the whispers of blame were louder than the voices of reason. The villagers' fear of the spirits overshadowed their compassion. Even those who supported Azuka grew wary, keeping their distance. By evening, Azuka could feel the weight of the village's judgment. People avoided walking near her compound, and even her younger siblings refused to touch her wrapper. That night, as she lay on her mat, unable to sleep, the whispers returned, clearer now. "Why did you leave us under the moon?" the voice said, low and cold. The chill in her room deepened, and for the first time, Azuka's skepticism gave way to real fear. She clutched the wrapper tightly, tears welling in her eyes. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself. The unease in the village grew heavier, and Azuka knew she couldn't ignore it anymore. She would have to face the consequences and find a way to make things right, or risk being shunned entirely, not just by her people, but perhaps even by forces beyond her understanding. The morning sun had barely risen when a crowd gathered in the village square, murmuring in low voices. Azuka stood at the center, her unease growing as pairs of eyes locked on her. The elders sat on a raised platform, their faces marked with a mix of concern and stern authority. Mama Aji, the eldest and most respected among them, tapped her wooden staff against the ground, silencing the restless crowd. "Azuka," Mama Aji began, her voice steady and clear, "you have done something careless, something that risks the harmony of this village. Do you understand what happens when you leave clothes outside under the moonlight?" Azuka hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. I didn't think it mattered. They're just clothes," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Mama Aji's expression darkened. "Just clothes," she echoed. "Clothes are more than pieces of fabric. They carry your essence, your scent, your warmth, your energy. To the Aguji spirits, they are as much a part of you as your own skin." The crowd gasped, some crossing their arms as though shielding themselves. A young boy whispered to his mother, who quickly hushed him. Mama Aji continued, her eyes boring into Azuka. The Aguji are weavers of the unseen. They roam under the moonlight, searching for things left behind. When they find such objects, they weave threads of their magic into them, binding the owner to their will. This is why the rule exists, to protect us from becoming their playthings. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the crowd. Then, she gestured for silence as she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a tone that commanded attention. Perhaps you have forgotten the story of Akana. The name sent a shiver through the gathering. Children leaned closer to their parents, and even the older villagers shifted uneasily. Many years ago, Mama Aji began. Akana was a hard-working woman who lived in this very village. Like you, Azuka, she was strong-willed and thought the old ways were foolish. One night, after a long day at the stream, she left her wrapper on the line, thinking nothing of it. The moon was full, and its silver light bathed the cloth as the village slept. That night, the Aguji spirits came. They found her wrapper and wove their magic into it. By morning it looked the same, but it wasn't. Akana wore the wrapper the next day, and strange things began to happen. She would hear whispers, and voices calling her name from empty corners. Her reflection in the water seemed to move on its own, smiling when she did not. Worse still, she began to feel weak, as though something was draining the life out of her. The crowd listened intently, their expressions grim. Mama Aji's voice grew softer, forcing them to strain to hear her. One day, Akana vanished. Some say she wandered into the forest, chasing the whispers. Others say the spirits claimed her entirely. All we know is this. When her family found the wrapper, it was covered in strange silver threads, just like the moonlight. Mama Aji leaned back, her eyes now fixed on Azuka. This is why we do not leave our clothes under the moonlight. The Aguji spirits are not evil, but they do not understand us. To them, weaving our essence into their threads is a game. But to us, it is a curse. Azuka swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of the villagers' stares and the truth of the elders' words pressing on her like a heavy stone. Mama Aji tapped her staff on the ground again, breaking the silence. You have disturbed the balance, Azuka. If you do not make amends, the spirits will continue to weave their magic into your life, and the consequences will grow darker. The warning was clear, and the air in the square felt thick with tension. Azuka nodded, her voice trembling as she finally spoke. What must I do to fix this? Mama Aji's gaze softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. There is a way, but it will not be easy. You must return the wrapper to the spirits, and you must offer them a gift in exchange for your carelessness. The crowd murmured again, some nodding in agreement, others whispering prayers under their breath. Azuka knew there was no turning back now. She had crossed a line, and the only way forward was to face the spirits themselves. On the night of the ritual, the moon hung high in the sky, its pale light bathing the village of Ahiara in an eerie glow. Azuka stood at the edge of her compound, clutching the red wrapper that had caused her so much trouble. In her other hand, she carried a wooden tray holding the offerings, white chalk, a small bowl of palm oil, and 3 kola nuts. Mama Aji's instructions replayed in her mind like a chant. Place the wrapper on the line, leave the offerings beneath it, and speak the words of forgiveness. Do not turn back, no matter what you see or hear. Her heart thumped loudly as she stepped into the darkness. The clothesline swayed gently in the cool night breeze, but the air felt heavier than usual, as though unseen eyes were watching. She reached the line and hung the wrapper carefully, smoothing it out as though afraid to anger the spirits further. The fabric felt colder than it should have, sending a chill through her fingers. Placing the tray beneath the line, Azuka knelt and began reciting the words Mama Aji had taught her. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each line. Aguji spirits, weavers of the unseen, I return what I should not have offered. Accept these gifts, and leave my soul in peace. The first time she said it, the night remained still. Too still. The usual sounds of crickets and distant animal calls had vanished, leaving a silence so profound it felt oppressive. Azuka's breathing quickened, but she forced herself to repeat the chant. The second time, the air grew colder, and a faint rustling sound came from the trees nearby. It wasn't the sound of wind or leaves. It was softer, like fabric being stretched and pulled. Azuka glanced nervously at the wrapper. It seemed to ripple slightly, though there was no breeze strong enough to move it. She hesitated. Was this a sign the spirits were listening? Or was it a warning to stop? Doubt clawed at her mind, but she clenched her fists and began the chant a third time. As the words left her lips, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, like a breeze brushing past her ears. Then they grew louder, overlapping and chaotic, as if dozens of voices were speaking at once. Some sounded curious, others angry. The words were impossible to understand, but their tone was clear. They were not pleased. "Leave me alone," Azuka muttered, her resolve wavering. But she remembered Mama Aji's stern warning. Do not turn back. Do not leave before the ritual was complete. She focused on the final line of the chant and forced it out through trembling lips. As soon as she finished, the whispers stopped abruptly. The silence returned, but it was far from comforting. The wrapper on the line began to glow faintly, silver threads appearing and twisting across its surface. They shimmered like moonlight caught in the water, weaving intricate patterns that seemed alive. Azuka's pulse raced. The glow brightened, almost blinding her. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw something moving, shadows shifting unnaturally at the edges of the compound. They didn't belong to trees or any familiar shape. They were human-like but distorted, their forms too thin, their movements too smooth. Her hands shook as she fought the urge to turn and run. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind rushed past her, knocking over the tray of offerings. The bowl of palm oil tipped, its contents spilling onto the ground. Panic surged in Azuka's chest. Had she ruined the ritual? Would the spirits punish her further? No, she whispered desperately, grabbing the bowl and placing it upright. The spilled oil glistened on the dirt, catching the moonlight in a way that seemed almost deliberate. It was then she realized. The wind had not been random. It was part of the ritual, a test to see if she would abandon the task in fear. Steeling herself, she finished the chant one last time, louder than before. Aguji spirits, I return what I should not have offered. Accept these gifts and leave my soul in peace. The glowing threads on the wrapper began to unravel, fading into the night air like mist. The shadows stopped moving, retreating into the darkness beyond the compound. The oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth that felt almost like approval. Azuka remained kneeling, her breaths coming fast and shallow. She stayed still for several minutes, afraid to move or speak. When she finally gathered the courage to stand, the wrapper looked normal again, its vibrant red color fully restored, no trace of the silvery threads left behind. She picked up the tray and whispered a shaky thank you to the spirits before retreating to her hut. As she closed the door behind her, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but also a lingering unease. As the first light of dawn touched the village of Ahiara, Azuka cautiously stepped out of her hut. Her heart raced as she approached the clothesline where she had placed her altered wrapper the night before. The air felt lighter now, the oppressive chill of the previous night gone. The wrapper, which had once shimmered with unnatural silver threads, now looked completely ordinary, its vibrant red color restored. Relief washed over her. The ritual had worked. The offerings, white chalk, palm oil, and kola nuts, were untouched, but a faint, swirling imprint of a hand marked the ground where she had placed them. It was a silent acknowledgement from the Aguji spirits that they had accepted her apology. For the first time in days, Azuka felt like herself again. The whispers were gone, the strange shadows no longer lurked, and the villagers who had been avoiding her began to greet her as she walked through the village square. Though peace had returned, Azuka couldn't forget the fear she had felt or the strange way the spirits had intruded on her life. That wrapper, once a favorite of hers, was now folded and stored deep in her bag. She couldn't bring herself to wear it again, a reminder of the delicate line between the human and spirit worlds. But Azuka's experience had changed her. Where she once dismissed the old customs, she now saw their importance. She realized the rules weren't just meaningless traditions. They were ways to protect the village from forces they didn't fully understand. She began to speak to the younger villagers, sharing her story about the evening fires. "It's not just about the clothes," she would say, her voice steady with conviction. "It's about respecting the balance of life. We don't have to see something to know it's real. The spirits are there, watching, just as the air surrounds us." Her listeners, especially the children, would lean in, their eyes wide with curiosity. For Azuka, passing on the lesson wasn't just about teaching. It was her way of ensuring that no one else repeated her mistake. The story of Azuka and the Aguji spirits is more than just a tale about clothes left on a line. It's a lesson about the balance between progress and tradition. In our eagerness to question and improve, we sometimes forget the wisdom embedded in the customs of the past. These rules, no matter how strange they may seem, often have roots in survival, respect, and harmony with forces beyond our understanding. In Ahiara, traditions like removing clothes before nightfall aren't just old habits. They're reminders of the unseen connections between people and their environment. Azuka's story teaches us that it's okay to seek progress, but not at the cost of losing respect for things we can't explain. As the villagers of Ahiara continue to gather their clothes before the sun sets, they do so with care and reverence. And in every careful hand that folds a wrapper or takes down a shirt, the story of Azuka lingers, a quiet reminder that the world is full of mysteries, both seen and unseen, and that respecting them is a way to live in harmony.